So my name is Gregory Adam Scott, and I'm head of Chinese at the University of Manchester. Chinese Studies is part of the Department of Modern Languages. This is my 6th year teaching here. Before this, I was doing postdoctoral work at the University of Edinburgh, and my PhD is from Columbia University in New York, actually in religion rather than in area studies. So my main research focus is on Buddhism in the modern period of Chinese history, so the latter part of the 19th century and early part of the 20th century. Although, of course, I'm interested in a lot of related topics, sort of the modern history of China more generally, other religious traditions, and historically I've gotten into publishing and print culture as well. So even though I have my own sort of little research area, I'm also interested in these related areas in addition to that. Absolutely. I remember when I was doing high school, I lived near Toronto, Canada, and every time I went into Toronto, I would always be sure to go to Chinatown, and I would see these enormous Chinese characters on the signs. And at the time, I felt like I can't understand what that means, but I really want to know. And Chinese characters, it's not an alphabet. You can't sound it out. You can't sort of guess what it means. You pretty much either know or you don't. So that's what got me interested in doing a Chinese Studies degree, which I ended up doing at York University in Toronto, and gradually built up my language skills that way. Having this experience of studying in many different countries, and especially having the experience of going abroad and studying Chinese, first in Taiwan and then in mainland China, was really important because it got me to use the language as a kind of a living language rather than having it be something that's limited to the textbook or limited to the classroom. Going there and actually having boots on the ground experience of living there and using the language was really important because it transformed it from something I was always kind of translating to and from in my head to a language that I was thinking in and using almost not quite as a native language, but certainly as a first language, right? Without always having English to reference. And when I did my first year abroad in Taiwan, I knew that something was happening. There was a transformation occurring when I started to dream in Chinese and I started to hear Chinese and speak Chinese in my dream. And I was fortunate because I was living with a number of other international students, most of whom did not speak very much English. So we would just talk to each other in Chinese for daily things as we were, sort of flatmates at the time. But in comparison, I do like the UK educational system, and I especially like our program here because it requires students to do a period of study abroad. In Chinese studies, they go to mainland China or Taiwan, and normally they're there to study the language as well. And I've seen it in past cohorts. It's such a transformational experience for them to have this sort of cultural encounter and the experience of living abroad on their own. They go through a kind of process of maturation, and they grow up a lot during that period. And I see it, when they come back for their final year here in Manchester. I think the joys are definitely having students who are very enthusiastic about the subject, but maybe don't know very much when they come into it. But to be able to teach, for example, our first year course unit, Introduction to Chinese Studies, where we lay out sort of a basic groundwork, a basic foundational knowledge about all different aspects of Chinese civilization, Chinese history. From history to economics to popular culture, visual arts, all of that kind of stuff that we do in area studies, to see them really respond to the material, to ask good questions, and then to sort of give them that foundational experience, and then to see them grow through the second year, the year abroad, and then their final year. It's very rewarding to me because that was the same kind of program that I did when I was an undergraduate as well. And I felt like I did really well in it, I enjoyed it, and now it's my chance to recreate some of this experience for our students here in Manchester. The challenges certainly nowadays are, at present, it's still almost impossible to go to mainland China, which I would very much like to do. Even though I'm a historian, I still need to access archives and libraries, and most of this material has not been digitized. It's only available in China. So it can be frustrating just knowing that the materials are there, but not actually being able to physically access them, at least not for the time being. I have one in the bookshelf there. So my main publication to date has been my book that came out in 2020. It actually got published in March of 2020, just a few weeks before the pandemic really hit in the UK and we went into lockdown. So that was a little unfortunate. It was not great timing, but in the end, the book came out anyway. So it's called, I can remind myself what it's called. Yes. So it's called Building the Buddhist Revival, Reconstructing Monasteries in Modern China. And it's a history between the 1860s into the 1960s about some key Buddhist sites that were rebuilt, reconstructed, or repaired in China, how they went about it, how they raised the funds, why they did it, and then the changing reasons behind these reconstructions over this century of history. So to date, that's my major publication, but I have a handful of chapters, articles in journals and things like that. It's difficult to separate the two things because to be a successful academic, at least for a period of time, you really have to give yourself up to the work and give yourself up to the calling, and many other things will take a back burner, at least for a short period of time. And I think it can be difficult completely separating one's personal life and one's work, but I don't know, I can't think of any particular examples of how my personal life has been shaped by my research. Certainly my sense of myself and my sort of my notion of self-worth in terms of me making a positive contribution to society and making the world a better place, even in just a small degree, I think definitely comes through my teaching and my research. Well, at the moment, I would like to do a second book. I'd like to look at one particular type of Buddhist publication. My original PhD research was on print culture among Buddhists during this period. The book came out of a postdoctoral project, so it's not so much about publishing, but more about building and repairing monasteries and other Buddhist buildings. So I'd like to return to a topic that I covered in my PhD and sort of do a new monograph looking at those materials. But at the moment, I'm just trying to finish this academic year and hopefully get some research leave and, like I said earlier, hopefully eventually travel to China to access the materials that they have in libraries there. It's been very positive. It's been so wonderful to have this institution here on campus. I guess Pete was just sort of organizing it when I first arrived, but it really got going in, I'd say, about the second year of when I came here in this post. And it's been transformational in terms of giving us a hub on the campus for all the China-related research activity. The in-person seminars have been great, and even during the lockdown, it was fantastic to have sort of a single institution that could organize online webinars and Zoom conferences and things like that. I think it's done a great deal to help increase the profile of China studies at Manchester, because it's one of the things that gets picked up by mailing lists and by colleagues around the globe. They see the MCI events happening, especially the online ones, and I think it reminds them that there is really good work happening here, and there's a really good research community and teaching community, of course, here in Manchester.